Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Japan and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. Now, these guys are another relatively new addition to the Japanese beer scene, but they've built up a very good reputation for themselves over the last couple of years. The beer that we're going to have a look at from them today, from what I understand, is one of their newer releases. It is their first attempt at this particular style. That style is one that is very, very popular just now, one that I do quite enjoy, so I think this should be a really nice introduction to this brewery. And it's always nice to cover new and upcoming Japanese breweries here on the channel as well. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. I've heard very good things about this brewery, so hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head a little bit north of me here in Osaka up to Nagoya in Aichi Prefecture. To be specific, we're going to go to the Minami-ku area, the southern part of the city, and a place called Casadera, which happens to be home to Tall Boys Brewing. So this will be my very first beer from these guys. It's called 4 Barrel, comes in at 8% ABV, and this one is a New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So a very popular style of beer in many different countries now. Of course, in Japan you have the likes of Uchu, West Coast Brewing and Totopia really finding fame in different places across the world with this style, but there are a number of other new breweries kind of popping up as well and doing this style too. So I'm hoping that Tall Boys are on the same level as those guys. I've heard very, very good things about them, so definitely nice to introduce these guys on the channel at quite an early point in their history. So yeah, this one I picked up at Binge, which is fairly central in Nagoya. A really nice selection of Japanese beers along with some different foreign things as well, and it's just got a really nice vibe actually, up on the kind of 6th floor if I remember correctly, and it has this enclosed patio, so do make sure you go and visit those guys as well. I'll try to remember to put the link to their Instagram page in the video description for you below. But let's crack on with this one then and see what it's going to have in store for us. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Tall Boys Brewing. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers as I mentioned, but I'm sure it won't be the last. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Japanese playlist along with a number of other things. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment, and quite regularly generally because I come over here to visit my son very often. But do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days, even if I do say so myself. And if you are particularly interested in Japanese craft beer, then do make sure you check out my friend Nevitt over at Japanese Craft Beer Reviews, and you can also check out my friend Jordan as well, who's doing some really interesting city beer guide videos on his channel as well. Jordan Outsider Inside Japan, so make sure you check out those links in the video description below. But let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Tall Boys Brewing for the first time then. So Tall Boys Brewing, as I said before, are based in Casadera in the Minami-ku area of Nagoya in Aichi Prefecture here in Japan, and the company was founded back in 2020 by 3 friends, Colin Blodgett, Rob Shannon, and also Alex. So Colin is originally from the US, and he was first introduced to beer brewing in his youth as it was his father's hobby, and he joined in later and started brewing for himself. So he moved to Japan to study, and he seemed to be destined for a career in the automotive industry, but he discovered that brewing was a legal grey area in Japan, and so it took a little bit of a back seat for him actually until the head brewer of Heretic Brewing was visiting Nagoya. So Colin took along one of his books that he'd written for him to sign, and by the end of the night apparently he had earned himself an internship position back over in the US. Rob, on the other hand, is originally from Vancouver in British Columbia in Canada, but he also spent a lot of time on the US West Coast. Apparently his grandparents lived on a farm just outside of Vancouver, and they were always barbecuing barbecuing different things, and they used to host big parties with beer and food. So his uncles actually came over to Nagoya when he was younger, and their stories of their time in Japan inspired him to go and check it out for himself. So he studied tourism management at university, but also undertook culinary training in France and Italy. And then in 2017, after moving to Japan, he founded Midtown Barbecue, originally in Nagoya, but they now have locations in Yokohama and Tokyo as well. Alex, finally, is from California in the US, but he's lived all across the world for long stretches, mainly in Europe and in Asia, and he's actually a retired military pilot and aircraft mechanic. He ended up in Nagoya working for Mitsubishi on their ill-fated MRJ SpaceJet program, which sounds really quite interesting. But to put all of these three guys together, Colin apparently met Rob at Midtown. And then at that time, he and another friend were talking about opening up a brewery, and this friend was already importing beer from Canada to Japan. So the plan didn't really come to fruition, as this friend suddenly had to pull out, and Colin actually knew Alex from a cycling group, and he was looking to move into something different, as the Mitsubishi project was just about to be cut, and he was edging closer to his retirement as well. So Colin introduced the two, then you had the three that make up Tall Boys Brewing. So these days, Colin is the head brewer and taproom manager, but also handles the paperwork related to brewing and the tax and stuff like this. Rob is the company president, and he takes care of the banking side of things, while Alex does a lot of the back office work and the sales side of things too. The brewery itself operates a 4.7 BBL kit, which I think, if memory serves me correctly, that will be somewhere in the region of like 750 litres, something like that, maybe a little bit bigger. But they've got 5 fermentation vessels, 2 single batch and 3 double batch ones, and this gives them an annual output of about 90,000 litres at full capacity. However, the production across 2024 was apparently 45,000 litres, but they do plan to scale this up over the course of 2025, as they've now got a nice Wild Goose canning machine, which this beer has very obviously been through. They've got a tap room at the brewery, which is open Tuesday to Sunday. It serves pizza and also American comfort food, things like hot dogs and stuff like that. You can check out the menu on the in the website in the video description below. But as of December 2024, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 40 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and like I said earlier, there is quite a diverse array of different styles in there. So yeah, these guys are doing a lot of good stuff from what I hear, and it is about time that I tried something from them. But that's everything I can really tell you about Tall Boys Brewing for the moment. A special shout out in the video as well to Colin, who actually was messaging me through Facebook and telling me quite a bit of that information that I just told you there. So yeah, big shout out to him for making this review possible as well. So yeah, if you want to learn more, check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done, and hopefully I can get up to Nagoya again at some point and film an out and about video at Tall Boys Brewing. Maybe we can get Colin into that as well. But yeah, let's crack on then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So just to give you some of the details of this one, like I said earlier, this one is an 8% New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. It's hopped with Amarillo, Cascade, Cashmere, Citra, Idaho 7 and Sats. Quite unusual to hear of Sats being used in a New England IPA, so that's something that really has my curiosity with this particular beer. Amarillo we know quite well, pretty much all the other hops we know quite well. Amarillo is about 12% alpha acid, American hop gives you that lovely oily orange, Cascade is your classic Yakima Valley hop, 8% alpha acid. I find it always gives you this kind of peary note with a little bit of sultana and grapefruit in there as well. Cashmere, a very interesting one, 14% alpha acid, this big lemon limey character with a lot of melon as well. Citra we know very well, 14% alpha acid, US hop, big juicy mango, bit of grapefruit and peach and things like that, little bit of lemon lime in a New England IPA. Idaho 7, 14% alpha acid, American again, and that's going to give you lots of soft juicy mango and apricots and papayas and pineapple and stuff. Your Czech Zats is also known as Žatec in the Czech language, but yeah, that's a noble hop, and the Czech noble hops have this slightly more spicy character to them as well. A New England IPA is of course always going to be a slightly lower IBU beer, not the lowest you'll find, but yeah, usually about 30, or in the case of a double IPA, I think these tend to be around sort of 40 IBUs. But yeah, I'll just like have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open up. You can see it's a nice picture of the brew house in there, so yeah, quite an interesting little setup there. I wonder if it's called 4-barrel after the system that it's brewed on. That would kind of makes sense actually. But yeah, plain silver top on the can there. This one is a ½ litre, and you can see some of the stuff on the side here. One of the Tall Boys Brewing symbols, a little bit of their brew house in there as well. And then yeah, at the top here you've got the QR code, and also made in Japan, which I think is quite nice. Yeah, it says 50 IBUs on the front there, so yeah, it would make sense that they kind of put the IBU up a little bit to kind of balance things out. ½ litre can, this one, it cost me 1,600 yen, which is about, that's somewhere in the region of about £8 sterling, €9, $10 American, something like that, just to give you a wide variety of different things. But let's get it out into the glass then and see what we have. Yeah, a little bit tired when I'm filming this one, so if I ramble a little bit, I do apologise for that. But here we go. Oh, it's interesting, this one. If we sugar it up a wee bit to get a bit more haze out of it? Interesting. I will say straight away, appearance-wise, this one isn't quite what I would have expected. But yeah, before the head disappears, about a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say, cream-coloured head on this one. You can see if we bring it up to the camera there, you've got nice, sort of slightly medium-sized bubbles on the surface there, and the head is very foamy the further up that you go. And yeah, you have this lovely kind of medium amber colour to this one. So 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones heading up toward the surface there. That head is fading away to be a kind of more thin foamy layer in there, and a few wee bits of sediment going around in this one as well. But yeah, and remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, and thus you get a darker colour beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect the colour as well. You don't often have to care about that with different kinds of IPAs though. When we're talking about New England hazy IPAs as well, you have to remember that these contain quite a bit of oat and wheat along with the barley. West Coast IPAs use primarily barley, of course. But yeah, this one, it's certainly not the haziest and soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs that I've come across actually. Not by far, but in fairness, I have seen New England IPAs like this. If I remember rightly, some of the stuff that I had from Alchemist originally was like that, and also Lawson's Finest Liquids. Their ones were not the soupiest and gloopiest either. It looks a bit more like a kind of American IPA, one of these kind of generically called American ones that's somewhere between West Coast and New England in a sense. But yeah, appearance-wise, not quite what I expected, but I have seen IPAs and New England IPAs that look like this before. So yeah, don't think we need to say anything more about that. I would have expected a more kind of milky, tropical fruit juice kind of colour to it, but yeah, not such a big deal. So let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one then and see how we go. Right. I'm going to say straight away, it actually has a fairly mild aroma to it. Yeah, it actually, what I was saying about this being a more kind of American IPA rather than specifically New England or West Coast might actually hold true with this one. I've smelt a few beers like this. It actually reminds me of Ale Farm from just outside of Copenhagen in Denmark. That was a brewery that I used to drink quite a lot back in Sweden. And the aroma, this one just really is setting off my contextual memory there. But yeah, nice soft juicy green component in this one, which again you'd expect in the New Englands. You have got quite a little bit of kind of brown sugary sweetness out of this one too, which is something that's a bit more along the lines of a West Coast IPA. Again, that makes me think, you know, straight American, generic American IPA. You've got a lovely breadiness in there, and you've also got that kind of juicy fruity character that you'd expect as well. But yeah, let's try and break that aroma down for you and just describe it a bit more in depth. So the backbone of the beer is a kind of fresh, white bready bread crust. It reminds me a bit of a hedgehog type roll. There are wee elements of like woodiness in there, and cracker, of course. These are things that you're always going to get from this style of beer. Smells like it's German malt actually. It's just got that little bit more dryness to it, in fairness. Although I do wonder, are the oats and the wheat in this one American? You can smell that anyway, because they've got, yeah, as I've often said, wheat and oats can vary a little bit depending on where they're from. European wheat's that little bit drier and more bitey, whereas American wheat's a bit smoother. European oats are more kind of creamy, whereas American oats are a bit more porridgey almost, in my experience. But yeah, you've got a little bit of sweet brown bread in there, a lot of white bread, of course. You can smell like a slightly denser wheaty white bready note as well. There's a wee bit of wheaty kind of bitiness at the back of the nose too, especially if you take that aroma in a bit more deeply. And the oats are in there as well. The oats are quite interesting, and as I've often said, in a New England IPA, oats can be a relatively good indicator of how fresh your beer is. Essentially, the creamier they are, the fresher the beer is, the drier they are, the older it is. But you do have to be aware of those little variances depending on where your oats are actually from. Does this beer have a canned on date on it? I'd be quite curious about that. No, it doesn't. But I think it is, it is fairly fresh. Like they told me in the shop that it was fairly fresh, and this one obviously was quite popular from what they told me as well in Binge. But yeah, with this one, the oats have a little bit of that porridge note, and they're starting to show you a wee bit of dryness. There was a wee touch of sediment in this one as well, and I have got the fridge set quite cold, so that could be my fault. But if it's got a bit of sediment in it, I would say it's been in the can at least like 2 months or so, something like that. So we have to bear in mind it's not at its absolute freshest, but as long as it tastes good, that is the main thing. But yeah, you get a nice little bit of the creamier oaty character in there. You smell a bit of the drier notes too, but this beer does have a wee bit of a brown sugary element to it. So you've got like Werther's Original in there, McVitie's Digestive Biscuit, butterscotch is maybe a kind of good way to describe that as well. But I don't know if I'd go as far as saying there is a straight up caramelly note in this one. So yeah, this is quite interesting. As I've often said, there are 6 elements to think about when it comes to New England IPAs. You have the sort of malty and yeasty side anyway. You've got the sort of farmhousey and yeasty type character on the rye and grainy side of things. Those are a bit more common in New England brewed New England IPAs, but as the styles moved elsewhere, the focus has been more on wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also your sweeter side of things. So yeah, this is quite a sweet leaning New England IPA, I would say, but the other parts of it, the wheat and the barley and the oats, all seem quite well balanced. The yeasty character in this beer at the back of the nose is quite it's a mix of white bread and brown bread, I would say. A little bit drier, of course, too. So yeah, white bready, brown bready, yeasty characters coming out of this one. It feels familiar in its yeasty note, in all honesty. Yeah, be curious to see the brew sheet of this one and see exactly what they've done. But yeah, definitely a sweet kind of more oily and caramelly New England IPA. It really does remind more of an American, generic American IPA. The green component of this one overall is quite smooth, in all honesty. You can smell a bit of that noble quality from the Czech Sats or Žatec, and I think that's been used as the early edition hop. So with IPAs, 3 types of hopping. Early edition hopping, which takes place within the first hour of the wort boil, gives you a wee bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. And it'll give you quite a deep, dank green component. You've got late edition hopping, which takes place within the last half hour of the wort boil. Good little touch of bitterness to it, but mainly flavour and aroma. It will give you a very bright green component. Dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, is all about flavour and aroma. It gives you a very bright green component. New England IPAs tend to rely on late edition and dry hopping. Not unheard of to use a little bit of early edition hopping though. But yeah, West Coast IPAs use all 3, which is why they're deeper, danker, and more bitter. But yeah, the green component in this one has a wee touch of earthiness to it from the Zats. There's a wee bit of a herbally, woody sort of thing going on as well. But nice floral aromaticity, not too spicy, which is interesting because, yeah, as I said, that's a characteristic of Sats. And then, yeah, you've got the kind of little bit of lighter, grassy sort of thing coming out of this one too. For me, the hops in this one, the melony notes from the cashmere are sticking out a little bit, and cashmere is a hop in my experience that you have to be a bit careful with because it can take over everything, especially depending on what yeast you use it with. Cashmere can be a very, very dominant hop, but underneath that you do get that lovely bright orangey character, oily zesty orange that you'd expect from Amarillo. I'm also getting quite a little bit of the kind of peary, sultana type notes from yeah, I'm getting a good little bit of that peary, sultana type note from the Cascade in this one. The Citra and the Idaho 7. I mean, there are wee elements of like apricot in there, wee bit of pineapple, mango and stuff. Yeah, there's wee elements of that, but not overly much, I would say. I think that the cashmere, the mosaic, and the Cascade are the ones that are jumping out at me more, in all honesty. But yeah, very interesting aroma that has made me think a wee bit, and that's what you want after 4,000 odd beer reviews on YouTube. You want beers that will make you think a little bit. As I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it's about time that we try this one and see what it's all about. This is the 4-barrel and 8% New England Hazy Imperial, or whatever you want to call it, IPA, from Tall Boys Brewing in Casadera, Minami, Nagoya, Aichi, here in Japan. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers, kanpai. It's pretty interesting beer, that. I think what I was saying about this being a more generic American IPA is probably true in this case. Although, in fairness, it does remind me of some of the Lawson's Finest Liquids and the kind of Alchemist type beers, the more sort of yeasty kind of caramelly and bready sort of ones. So yeah, it could fit in with that, but I think the perception of what most people would think our New England IPAs are the likes of what Uchu and West Coast Brewing and stuff like that are doing. This one I have seen from New England, but it's one of the more unusual variants, if you like. But the question should always be, is it a good beer? Is it enjoyable? And for me, the answer to this is yes. I like these sort of things too. Yeah. So if you drink this one, it's, yeah, it is more of the kind of, it's taken the more sort of farmhousey and sweet side of the New England style, I would say, which is something I don't think I've had in Japan actually, so that makes it equally interesting, if you like. So it makes it even more interesting, I should say. So yeah, interesting stuff from Tall Boys with this beer for sure. I'll need to try a few of their other things, but on the basis of this one, and the way it's kind of going about its business, I'd be quite curious to try some of the West Coast IPAs from these guys too, and the more malty leaning styles actually. But yeah, let's kind of break this beer down then and describe it for you that bit more in depth, as I always like to do. So yeah, middle third of your palate, backbone of the beer. You've got that lovely kind of fresh bready bread crust in there. I'd say it's more of a kind of brown bready bread crust actually. As you move further forward, you get that little touch of woodiness that always lingers there behind the front of that middle third of your palate. On top of that, there's a layer of kind of cracker. I'm actually getting quite a little bit of a more dense, I'm getting a little bit of a more kind of dense wholemeal brown bready character out of this one. It's got a good little bit of sweetness to it, in fairness too. Above that, you've got a more white bready character, which is again fairly dense. The bready layers in this beer are actually pretty damn sweet, come to think of it. And then above all of that, you have the really dense wheaty component in this one. That really dense, almost slightly sweet wheaty white bread coming out of the beer. So yeah. If you go down the middle line of your tongue, you can feel the oatiness in this one, but I will say that compared to the aroma, I think the oats and the flavour really take a bit of a back seat in this beer. So yeah, down the middle line of your palate, you can feel a bit of that oaty creaminess there. And as you move out toward the edges of your palate, it just gives you a little bit of a kind of oaty dryness. And then of course above that, you start to get the brown sugars. And with this one being 8% ABV, you are going to get a little bit of that because of the booziness of the beer. So in the dead centre of your palate, you've got that little circle there, where I would say it is straight up caramelly in this case, but it's kind of surrounded by a bit of a Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy type note to it. And then yeah, as you move further out from that, it becomes a little bit more, yeah, absolutely gets a little bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity type quality to it as well. And that sweetness does linger into the aftertaste a little bit. I would say that about this particular beer. Yeah, is there anything else we need to say about the middle third of the palate? Don't think so, to be honest with you. But yeah, the brown bready character and the sweetness of that comes out into the aftertaste too. So let's go to the pardon me, nothing to do with the beer there, that's a cough I've had for ages. Let's go to the back third of your palate then. So I've often said sweeter flavours will come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours will come out further back, and generally speaking, the flavours on the back third of the palate and the middle third of the palate are similar, just at different intensities. So yeah, border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in there, brown bread in the base, the white bread in the middle, and then the more dense wheaty white bread on top. So the base of the back third of your palate is the brown bready bread crust once again, has a wee bit more kind of dryness and graininess to it. You've got the kind of Jacob's cream cracker sitting on top of that. Your wholemeal brown bready layer is above that, but it's a little bit lighter, taller and more airy. The white bready layer sits above that again, a little bit lighter, taller, more airy. Those are the barley malt layers. Then the more dense wheaty character sits on top of that as well. And the wheat in the back of the palate does have a wee bit more bitiness to it, but it's still overall really pretty smooth. So that makes me think American wheat. Australian, of course, is a possibility here in Japan as well, just thinking the distances for the imports and so on. But yeah, above everything else on that back third of your palate, you start to get the yeasty side of the beer coming out. So let's look at that yeasty character. So yeah, the yeasty side of this beer comes out more into the aftertaste, and it feels like at its core, it's a mix of like a sweet and a slightly drier brown, kind of wholemeal brown bready character in there. And as you move further out from it, you get a slightly sweeter brown bready note, and yeah, it's more kind of bread crusty around the very edge there actually. So yeah, the way that everything pieces together on that yeasty side of things is quite interesting. It does give the beer that little touch of dryness into the aftertaste, and definitely, yeah, back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. And in a way, I do wonder, the yeasty character that comes out of this beer feels quite familiar. Could it be a US-05 or something like that? There's just something that's really, really nostalgic about some of the flavours that are coming out of this beer. You know, could it be the Cephalo or the US-05 yeast that's been used in this? This beer just has that little bit of raw, small batch kind of quality to it. And they said this was their first attempt at a New England double IPA, so it makes sense that it just feels that little bit more raw actually. So interesting beer in that particular regard for sure. I think that's everything we need to say about malty and yeasty character though. Let's go to the hoppy side of things. So back corners of the palate, you have a nice little bit of earthy character in there. A wee bit of a herbally note and a bit of woody character, and that's going to be the Sats that gives you that. But as you move further forward, you can feel it sort of becomes a little bit more kind of floral and oily almost. Then round the front curve of the tongue, it's got a little bit of a lighter, more grassy note to it. It's a wee touch zesty, but yeah, you've got that little bit of grassiness coming out of this one too. So interesting. Yeah, definitely the noble hop character in this one makes it quite unique, I would say, and I'm pretty sure that the IBU in this one, I have to admit, I would think the IBU is a little bit lower than 50. Pardon me, but the green component in this one being quite noble is a bit unusual, I think, for the New England hazy IPAs, in all honesty. But let's go to the front third of your palate then and look at the fruity side of the beer. Yeah, so front third of your palate, border region between front and middle third of your palate, you get that little bit of bready build up in there again, brown bready character in the base, the kind of white bready character in the middle, and the more dense wheaty note on top. The base of that front third of your palate is the kind of more wholemeal brown bready bread crust, if you like. Crackers there, the brown bread, the white bread, and then the smoother side of the wheat. Then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So for me, I could see the Cascade being used as an early edition hop in this as well, actually, because into the aftertaste there's a wee bit more dankness to the beer as well. But yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you can feel that little teeny tiny touch of grapefruit, and that'll be from the Citra and the Cascade in this one. But as you move further forward with this one, I'm pretty sure this one had, was it Incognito or something like that? There was one of the kind of more hop oil products in this one, so the green component is quite smooth, we should also say that. But yeah, there's a little touch of like peachy note in this one. You can feel that sort of peary sultana in the back half of that front third of your palate. On the fruity side of things, you can feel that sultana peary type quality from the Cascade for sure. There's wee bits of like apricot and oily pineapple in there. That's going to be a mix of your Citra and your Idaho 7 for sure. But when you go into the front half of the front third of your palate, the beer does become more citricy almost. Yeah, the front half of that front third of your palate, you can feel the nice zesty orange of the Amarillo coming through, particularly into the aftertaste. That comes out a bit more. There's a wee bit of a, you do feel that the cashmere in this one isn't dominating, which is quite nice. But yeah, you get a little bit of the melon and a bit of a, particularly toward the kind of front tip of your tongue. But then yeah, above that, you have, above that, you definitely have more of a, you've definitely got a little bit more of a kind of, there's a wee bit of like a pineapple, sitting on top of that. So yeah, there's a bit of lemony limey character, the melon, and then the juicy tangerine orange in this one. But yeah, all in all, the way that it goes together in this one, I think, is nice and gets a big thumbs up from me. So the fruity side of this one, that nice oily character that it has, that is a wee bit more West Coasty, not so much soft and juicy like the New England's. That's one of the reasons why I think my overall conclusion is that this one is a bit more of a kind of American IPA. But like I said, I have had a few IPAs from like Lawson's Finest Liquids and Alchemist and stuff like that have been like this. So yeah, an interesting beer for sure, and one that has made me think a wee bit. I like this, and I would be very curious to try some other things, but it's not your typical New England hazy IPA, this one, that's for sure. Let's round off the review then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So yeah, for me, this beer, it's kind of pushing toward the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth in this one. It's got a bit of an oily character to it, which suits the more malty flavour that the beer has. There is a wee bit of dryness in there and a very slight kind of creaminess almost, but yeah, more of an oily and slick beer, this one. As you very often get with Japanese beers too, it's quite clean and drinkable. American brewer here, of course, but Japanese beer always has this element of drinkability to it that I talk about. Very, very clean water, something I'm very sensitive to as a Scot and a Swede. But yeah, IBU wise, we know this one's 50 IBUs. I would have guessed less actually. It does give you a wee bit of bitterness, but also dryness into the aftertaste too. The malt base, as we say, a bit of dryness in there, smoothness in the middle, and a kind of drier sweetness on top. Then you've got a good little bit of oily, fruity character to this one as well. A bit more of the tropical stuff comes out into the aftertaste, of course, but yeah, more kind of citrusy leaning in the beginning as well. But all in all, a really interesting beer, this one, and it does make me quite curious to try. Pardon me, some of the other things from Tall Boys Brewing as well. So yeah, all in all, positive first look at this brewery, and I'm curious to try more. So yeah, this one was the 4-barrel and 8% New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, more like one of the Alchemist or Lawson's Finest Liquids ones, a bit old school if we're looking at it from the New England IPA perspective, like very old school when it comes to this style. But for me, an enjoyable beer, I would say. I do wonder what yeast they've used in this. I want to say US05 or something like that. But yeah, this beer actually feels like a little bit raw and very kind of small batch in a sense, which is quite interesting. But yeah, definitely worth trying, and I'm curious to try more from this brewery. I think that's a good place to leave this one. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Tall Boys Brewing as well, and we will see about returning to these guys at some point again in the very near future. But until then, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Kanpai.